Hey guys. Okay, so today we're going to learn three things. First, we're going to add some symbols to our unit. You know, last time we learned the symbols, the P and the Q and the little squiggle that means negation, but we're going to add some. So take a second and write down this title, Symbols in Logic. You can pause the video if you want to. Now, the first one that we've already done is you have an arrow. This is an if-then statement. Okay, so it could be any of the ones that we learned last class, the conditional, the converse, the inverse, or the contrapositive. Another new symbol that you're going to learn is called a caret, and it looks like you're making a capital A. So do you see how this is like the start of a capital A? Like if I finished it, that would be an A. So the symbol just looks like that part without the part that I dotted. And this just means and. Just because and starts with an A, so you can remember it because it looks like you're doing a capital A. And you would see it like this, P and a Q, and then in between it, you would have that symbol. So you would read this as P and Q. The next one's going to be for or, and that's similar to the and, except it's upside down. So this symbol right here means or. And again, you would see it like P, Q, and then you would have the symbol in between it, and you would read this as P or Q. Another new symbol that you're going to see is this double arrow. So take a second to give me a double arrow, and this is called a biconditional statement, which we'll learn about on the next page. So this is a biconditional statement, and again, you would see a P and a Q, and then you would have this arrow, just copy and paste it, in between the two. And this tells you that it's a biconditional statement. So not a regular if-then statement, but just a biconditional. And we'll learn about those again on the next page in just a second. Just trying to space that out a little bit better. Okay, so there's your biconditional. The last new symbol that you're going to learn is three dots that kind of form a triangle. And when you see the three dots, that means therefore. So you might see something that's like the negation of P to the negation of Q with the three dots in the middle, and then that means the negation of P, therefore the negation of Q. So this is not going to be an if-then statement. It's only going to be an if-then statement if you see this single arrow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a P. You write this down. So your P is I study. And then your Q is I pass. And then if I gave you some symbols, you could translate it into words. So if I gave you the statement, I don't study, and I didn't pass. So pause the video and take a second to try to write that in symbols. So I don't study is the negation of P, and the and is the caret, the upside down caret, and then I didn't pass is the negation of Q. So your answer should look like this. I don't study, and I didn't pass. So that's an example of how you would go from words into symbols. Once you're done taking the notes, I have a worksheet for you to practice kind of going back and forth from words to symbols and then back symbols to words. Okay, the next kind of statement that we're going to learn about is called a biconditional, which we mentioned before is that double arrow. So go ahead and pause the video, write down your title, and then here's the conditional statement that we're going to work with. If today is Monday, then tomorrow is Tuesday. I want you to get into the habit of always first labeling it. So this part is our P. So that's defined as our P throughout this whole exercise. And then tomorrow is Tuesday is our Q. Okay, so for this exercise, P is Monday, Q is Tuesday. The first thing that I want you to do is take a minute and write the converse. So again, pause the video and then take a minute to write the converse. Okay, so here's what you should have. If tomorrow is Tuesday, so this is our Q, so again for the converse, you're just switching the order. Whoops, that one's kind of messy. And then today is Monday, and this is our P. So we just changed the order. Remember, converse is just change order, Q to P. Now what we're going to do, which is a little bit different from last class, is we're going to look at that converse and decide if it's a true statement all the time. So think about this now in regular life. If tomorrow is Tuesday, does today have to be Monday? So you should be thinking, is there ever a time that this part's true, that tomorrow is Tuesday, that today is not Monday? And I definitely can't think of a time where tomorrow is Tuesday that it's not Monday. So if the converse and conditional are both true, you can write a biconditional. So just make yourself a note. The conditional and converse must always be true. Okay? So write that down, highlight it. This is the most important part. The conditional and the converse must be true for you to be able to write a biconditional statement. Okay? So the biconditional is not an if-then statement. You just start with the P or you start with the Q. You can go in either order. So I'm going to start with the P and I'm going to say today is Monday. And then the phrase that goes in the middle is if and only if, and this abbreviates as IFF, and then you just do the Q. So today is Monday, if and only if tomorrow is Tuesday. And there's your first biconditional, where you start with the P. Let's label that again. This is the P, and then this is the Q. Now notice it doesn't start with the word if, it has the phrase if and only if, or the abbreviation IFF inside. Now the other way you can do it is to go backwards. You could start with the Q. So tomorrow is Tuesday, if and only if today is Monday. So still, either way is fine. It doesn't matter to me. If you're asked to write it biconditional, you can do either phrase. Now if we label this one starts with the Q and ends with the P. So either one of those is correct. And again, this is when the conditional and the converse are always true no matter what. Now the last thing that we're going to learn about is called a counterexample. So take a minute and write down the title, counterexample, and then for this, our conditional statement's going to be if you have Miss Hamilton or Miss Ham, then you take geometry. That's your conditional statement for this exercise. So pause the video and write that down, and then label it. So it's a good idea to always label your P's and your Q's so that you get used to that so you don't mix them up. So the first thing we're going to do is write the converse. So take a minute, pause the video, and try to write the converse on your own. So here's what your converse should say. If you take geometry, then you have Miss Ham. Now let's think about that statement. So this is our Q. Again, we just did the converse. So the converse just changes the order. So if you take geometry, then you have Miss Ham. So let's decide if that's true. Are there students who take geometry who don't have me as a teacher? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of students, right? So we cannot write a biconditional because this is not true. This is now false. So let's put a big F there because we've decided that this is false. It's sometimes true because you guys take geometry and you have Miss Ham, but it's not always true. So in order to be true, it needs to be always true. And remember, if it's sometimes true, then it's false. So in this case, now we can provide, let's say if the converse is false, then provide a counter example. So take a minute to jot that down in your notes, pause the video if you need to. And then here we're talking about if the converse is false. And a counter example is just an example that makes it false. So there's not a true phrase for this. It's not an if-then statement. You're just telling me how it could be a false statement. So if you take geometry, then you have Miss Ham. You could say students who have another geometry teacher. So if you know another geometry teacher, you could provide their name. If you have a friend who has geometry and they have a different teacher, you could put their name. You could say Mike has Miss Fry, or Sarah has Mr. Noga. So if you know names, you can put them. If not, you can just say students who have another geometry teacher. Okay, so this again's counterexample. If the converse is not true, we did biconditional statements if the converse and the conditional are both true, and then we learned these symbols. Okay, so the next thing that you need to do is get the worksheet from the sub, and then that's practice with the symbols and with providing a counterexample or a biconditional statement, and then you can get that checked by the sub. And when you're done, you can now work on your project. So if you go to your project, you can start at slide 5. So take your converse and just copy and paste it right here onto this line here, because you're going to use the same converse from slide 4 in this entire project. So copy that here and then decide if it's true or false. For most of the advertisements, you're going to be able to say that it's false somehow and then provide a counterexample. So the project example that we used was if you drink Red Bull, then you have wings. So a counterexample would be a different way that you could have wings and not drink Red Bull. So you could say, I'm a bird, I'm in an airplane, I'm in a helicopter, I could drink Pepsi and fly. So those are just different examples of how you can have wings and not drink Red Bull. So you should be able to complete that based on your converse. Then for this, I just want symbols. So no words on this slide. It should take you about 10 seconds. You can copy and paste from right here. So if you need to copy and paste the arrows, you can just copy and paste them and then use a P and a Q. So there should be no words on this slide, just a P and an arrow and a Q and this negation, which you can copy from here, or it's also the button that's right above the tab. You can just use the shift of that. Then you can do slide 7. So you're translating into words. So put your hypothesis and conclusion here in the top part of the slide, and then you're translating it. Now, some of these sentences might not make sense to you, but that's okay. You just write them. Now, the only one that's going to be an if-then statement is this one right here because of the arrow. So for this one, if we go back to the I study and I pass example, I would say, I didn't pass, therefore I didn't study. This is a biconditional, so I would say, I study if and only if I pass. This one would start with the negation of Q, so I didn't pass or I studied. So again, that doesn't really make sense, but you're just practicing going from symbols into words. And then this one's going to be kind of a long compound sentence, but you guys can handle it. This would be, if I don't study, then I don't pass, and I don't study. So again, doesn't really make a lot of sense, but that's okay. It's just practicing going from symbols to words. And then the last slide that you can do is just putting your hypothesis here and your conclusion here. There's text boxes, so if you just click, you can just copy and paste your your hypothesis here and your conclusion here. And that's as far as you can go on your project. So you can work on that for the rest of the period. There's also a math space assignment if you have time. And then when I come back next week, we will continue working on the project. Bye, guys.